Meeting is being live streamed. Well, hello, Colorado. Today is April 7th, 2024. Glad you could join us today. This is a live stream from Free State, Colorado, and the Libertarian Party of Colorado. We have with us Michael Vance, Legislative Director. Michael, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Brandon. How about yourself?
Oh, doing very well, thank you. Missed last week because of the Easter holiday. A lot of us had family and other obligations, but really excited to get back into it. Definitely missed it. It's kind of crazy, but I love I love being able to do this and have a voice and try and get out there and try and get people activated, get people involved, and get people interested in what's going on in our local government. I think I am really optimistic. We're seeing a little bit more interest in local politics relative to national politics. Usually national politics always takes the bulk of the conversation when you
Definitely
talk to somebody
missed
about
it.
politics. But yeah, it's been good to see a lot more people, a lot more interest in the local political stuff going on, specifically here around our state legislature. It's absolutely crazy year down there. So anything we can do to kind of get the word out, get some information out, get people activated and get people motivated to get involved and have a voice and speak out. Colorado, every citizen and citizen or not, you can go down to the state legislature and testify on a bill uh, in the committee hearing. So we're going to go through those bills tonight. So for people who are new, we really just focus on committee hearing bills, not the bills that may be heard in the Senate or the House as a whole. We want to focus on the bills that you can go down and speak on during the committee hearings this week. So we'll be discussing bills here from this week, starting here tomorrow on April 8th through the end of the week. Thursday is the last day for committee hearings of April 11th. So perfect. I think we'll go ahead and jump right in here. Are you ready to get going, Michael?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
Perfect. We do have some special guests here on our panel, so I'm hoping they will want to jump in at some point. So feel free, if anybody here is on the Zoom call, jump in and interrupt me if you'd like and talk about any of the bills we're going to be going through tonight. So since we didn't meet last week, I deleted the slide. Usually we go back and look at the bills from the previous week, the ones we discussed to see what happened, if they passed, they got amended, they got killed. We're going to skip that this week since we've been 2 weeks out. We thought just jump right in, and we got a lot to talk about. So some of the interesting bills being heard down at the Colorado State Legislature this week. Let's look at Monday. Monday, April 8th, this Institute Charter Schools and Bond Indebtedness Bill, House Bill 1154. Actually considered a good bill by Colorado Liberty Scorecard and some others. It's going to give charter schools more access to money so that they can get more of that tax money. And, for a lot of people, charter schools are a great alternative to public schools. Public schools in general, even though charter schools, I guess, are relatively public schools, right? I don't want to misspeak, but nonetheless, giving parents the ability to send their kids to charter schools, get them out of those more regular type of public schools seems to be a relatively good thing. I think that was some of the reason why this was considered a good bill. However, of course, public schools in general for a lot of libertarians or liberty-minded individuals are just bad overall. So a good pro-charter school bill being heard tomorrow, Monday, April 8th, in the Education Committee, Senate Committee Room 357. So, kind of an interesting one there for people. You can show up, speak out. Of course, these committee hearings, the committee members vote to keep the bill alive and moving through the process. So, those are the people you want to reach out to if you oppose or support any of these bills. And it's always really important, I think, for individuals across the state to know who is the sponsoring these types of legislation, right? There's some patterns and some really bad legislators down there. So, perfect. Anybody on the panel want to jump in on this one?
Yep. I I just want to say really quickly, I live in Jefferson County. I'll do everything I can to not send my kid to Jeffco schools. It's extremely hard to do that considering the cost of living in this state right now, especially in this area. Um, so if you can do anything and everything you can to fight Jeffco schools, this is absolutely one of those things that I would recommend supporting, even though if you can get your kid out of a publicly funded school, any type of publicly funded school, that's the best possible option. But sometimes people just can't do that. So this is your next best bet is charter schools.
Yeah, fair point. 100% fair point. So perfect. All right, we're going to move on here. See what other bills we got going on this week. Big list. So, of course, anti-gun bills galore. The anti-gun legislators down there are going to town this year. Some of the worst gun legislation we've seen in a long, long time. So on Monday in the House Finance Committee, House Bill 1353 will be heard. This is the one to create a whole new licensing and permitting process for gun stores, gun dealers across the state of Colorado, and gun employees, people who work at gun shops, getting fingerprinted, getting background checked. This is really an attempt to clamp down on the industry, to really put some of these smaller gun dealers out of business. Little gun shops can potentially go out of business, some mom and pop shops, because now they have a lot more expensive regulations to adhere to, and they might not be able to do it. So, really, really bad bill. Of course, the right to self-defense is not only in the Second Amendment, but it's a fundamental human right. Everybody has the right to defend their lives, to defend their family, to defend their business. And these legislators, unfortunately, are trying to make it a little bit harder to do that. So, really bad bill. A bill totally designed to attack firearms dealers and push them out of the industry. Really, one of the big patterns with all these anti-gun bills is that they want to change the culture. It's death by a thousand cuts. It's a little attack here, a little attack there. They know, these anti-gun legislators know, they can't just override the Supreme Court and outlaw guns tomorrow. They would if they could, but they know that's not feasible. However, they know dozens of little bills that slowly restrict the industry, that make it harder to do business and kind of shift that culture away from a pro firearms culture is what they can do. So unfortunately, that's what we're seeing. So House Bill 1353, absolutely terrible bill, terrible, terrible bill, creating an expensive, lengthy registration and permitting process. So do everything you can if you're in the firearm industry or a firearm owner, or support the Second Amendment or our just right to self-defense, to show up at the House Committee Room 112 in the House Finance Monday, 1:30 p.m. Really bad bill. Reach out to those committee members on the House Finance Committee. All this information can be found at leg.colorado.gov. It's really your one-stop shop for our General Assembly here in Colorado. All right, well, we'll go ahead and move on unless anybody else has anything on there. So that's what we got for Monday. So really bad bills being heard in committee, both the House Finance and the Senate Education. A good bill there. So looking at Tuesday, a bill we've been talking about quite a bit, Senate Bill 65. Unfortunately, this is an attempt to create a new civil penalty for individuals who are using their cell phones while driving. You know, uh, I think this is a bad bill. It's going to create more dangerous police interactions with individuals driving down the road. It's not going to do anything to make our roads safer and stop people from using their cell phone. Let's be realistic. People are going to use their cell phone anyway. People probably already think it's illegal. On some level, it is illegal, distracted driving and the like. But nonetheless, this is an interesting part of this bill I wanted to bring up is that this bill, a version of this bill passed years ago, and it only applied to individuals 18 years of age and under. So this is one of those examples where we see these legislators kind of testing the waters, pushing that bill out there for young people. And then this year, hey, we're just going to apply it for everybody. We're going to apply it to adults as well. So it's interesting to see those patterns. And I want to really sound that alarm for people that might see a bill one year and say, well, it's not that bad. It's only affects these part of the population, or it only has to do with this one issue. But it's setting the stage for that bill to a new bill to come out years later. That's going to make more people affected. So kind of a good example of that right here. But bad bill, you're talking about $75 fines, license suspension points, really bad stuff. So it's something that should definitely be opposed. Of course, some people will say, anything to stop people using their cell phones while driving. Well, I'll tell you, this bill ain't going to do that. It's going to raise money for the government. They're going to see it as another opportunity to collect revenue from people driving to work. People may be getting that work phone call where they're driving home or anything like that. One of those things where it's like, you got to answer, but there you go. So this bill is being heard Tuesday upon adjournment in LSBA. That's the Legislative Service Building, Room A. So that Legislative Service Building is across the street from the State Capitol Building, just on the south side there. So always be aware of where these committee hearings are going to be held, when they're going to be held. Upon adjournment will mean that the as a whole, that House is adjourned for the day. So the House business could take a half hour, it could take a couple hours. So you kind of got to be available for that whole morning on Tuesday if you wanted to use your voice to testify against this bill. But nonetheless, that bill, Senate Bill 65, and it's very unfortunate that you have somebody like Rhonda Fields, Meg Froelich, David Ortiz, Chris Hansen, people who are all about police accountability, people who are about, maybe some criminal justice reform in years past, but now they're just going to pass a bill to raise revenue for the state and create more dangerous police encounters. That's going to lead to people being hurt, probably. So bad bill there.
I can
All
only
right.
see an insurance push on this one. Like the coverages insurance companies are really pushing to get this into legislation so that they have more of a reason not to cover accidents.
So it's one of our panelists, Jody. Thank you very much for joining us, Jody. Jody's a great activist showing up at the state capitol, using her voice, testifying at these committee hearings. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. This is creating new incentives for insurance companies. They're going to have to respond to this type of legislation. And, we're just one more step closer to say, hey, put a camera in your car, be monitored all the time, put some sensors in your car, and then the state will be okay with it and we'll give you an insurance break. So yeah, definitely an invasive bill that's probably going to raise insurance premiums or create new hurdles for some of these businesses.
Right.
Perfect. So we'll go ahead and move on there. So bad bill. When we've talked about a bit, it's kind of gone through the whole history here. Great thing about the legislative website, there's so much information about all of these bills. It's very easy to become an expert on what's going on down at the state capitol and encourage people to really pay attention. It's easy to get distracted by national or international politics, but here's what's happening in Colorado, down in Denver affects you much, much more. So it passed the Senate and is now in the House. So this is the first committee hearing in the House. So we'll see where it goes from there. But we're going to move on. Still on Tuesday of this week. Very interesting bill here. I really wanted to bring this one up because it fits the pattern of government trying to, micromanage society, trying to socially engineer or civilly engineer in any ways how our society is set up according to the wants of our elected representatives. So House Bill 1366, Sustainable Local Government Community Planning, is another example of the state legislators using that carrot, using that state funding, going to counties, municipalities, and local governments only if they adhere to, some climate action plan. So, hey, you want this money from the state government? You want this tax money that's being pulled out of your local community, ends up at the state. These legislators get to decide to do with it. Well, hey, if under House Bill 1366, you've got to create this climate plan and follow all these little hurdles we're going to create, and then we'll give you some of that tax money back if Meg Froelich and Kyle Brown get their way. So another insidious way for the state government, these politicians, to try and socially engineer society or engineer society in a direction that they want by withholding funding from local communities who don't want to comply with their little climate action plans.
That's why I'm grateful for what's going on out in Keensburg with Mayor Aaron Lamb. I mean, he's out there actually putting up a fight. You can see what he's done with a couple different things from the migrants, and he's also done it with helping create a Second Amendment sanctuary state out there, or not state, but city, to help kind of combat these crazy gun laws that are coming out of the Capitol. So these
Yeah.
they're going to be fighting this crap. So it's a bit of a white pill.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we're lucky to have some great local elected officials like Aaron Lamb, Mayor Keensburg, who's definitely wanting to push back against the state and try and preserve some freedom in Weld County in Keensburg. But you can see how you do it. See how they do it. You see the game plan here from these state legislators. Hey, follow this plan, and we'll give you the money. Just follow along. So unfortunately, puts these elected officials at the local level in kind of a bind, right? Hey, I better develop this climate action plan. We want that federal, state money coming into our local community, right? We don't get left behind. So bad bill. Just one more bill that we've seen this year, a whole host of them, where they're trying to create these little community planning at the state level, as opposed to letting the local governments, local municipalities make their own decisions about how those communities should develop.
And the good news on this bill is there's no Senate sponsor as of now.
Nice. That is a great sign. this bill. This will be its first committee hearing, so it'll be interesting to see what amendments are offered. It'll be interested to see how it's received. So coming up here on Tuesday, April 9th, the bill's been sitting in the hopper for almost a month now, so that's always interesting to see. But it'll be in the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee upon adjournment, Legislative Service Building A. So that's, like I said earlier, across from the state capitol. So an interesting bill to keep our eyes on for sure. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on here. So that's two in the House Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee tomorrow. The cell phone criminal civil penalties and that local government central planning. Moving on to the House Judiciary Committee, a couple interesting bills on Tuesday. One's not really a bill, it's a resolution. So the House Republicans have been trying to impeach Jenna Griswold, Secretary of State of Colorado, somewhat more of a political activist than actually a elected non-biased representative of the people for sure. So this was introduced and is now going to be heard this week. So very interesting to see it come through. It looks like April 4th is when it got introduced in the House and then assigned to the Judiciary Committee. So it'll be interesting to pay attention to that. I mean, we basically know what's going to happen, right? The Democrats have a majority in the House. There's no chance that this gets out of any type of committee. But nonetheless, it's a good opportunity to expose some of this bad behavior of Jenna Griswold and her bias using her elected office for political purposes, trying to influence national elections and trying to influence local elections based on her personal beliefs. So hopefully this shines some light, put some more pressure on Jenna Griswold. And if you don't know Jenna Griswold, I am 99% certain she wants to be the next governor of Colorado after Polis is out. So in my mind, anything to tarnish her, stop her, slow her down from that that plan is a good thing in my mind. So I know some of the commenters on Twitter and social media were complaining that oh, these Republicans, they don't do any, they know this is going to fail. It's a waste of time, waste of money, all of this. But nonetheless, I think there's Secretary of State's playing politics with her office, having the House Republicans in an extreme minority position, being able to play a little bit of politics and fight back. I got to give him some credit for that.
How does a left-wing partisan person like Jenna Griswold lose to Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Kajinti Brown Jackson? It's absolutely wild that they brought that case before those judges and got shellacked the way they did. Even funnier is Gorsuch's old clerk was the one arguing the case before Gorsuch, and he just kept getting slapped down by his old boss. So absolutely wild.
Absolutely wild.
That morning at 9:30 in the morning, we're having that big rally outside because they're serving the Baumgart's petition, a 5,000-page what is it? The redress of the grievances. They're serving to the Colorado State Legislature that morning and the Sheriff's Department. They're having a peaceful protest across the Capitol there that morning, and they're going to deliver those grievances to the legislator.
I appreciate the information on that, Jody. I wasn't aware of that. So please, yes, pass that along. Happy to share that and get that information out there to people.
Yes,
just wanted to briefly read from the House resolution here of why House Republicans are saying that Jenna Griswold should be impeached. And of course, a lot of it has to do malfeasance of office, I think, is probably the key line there. Of course, the Anderson versus Griswold, as Michael just talked about. This Colorado Supreme Court, said that Donald Trump should be off the ballot. And then, of course, it went up to the Supreme Court and changed, as we all know. However, I love this line here. Whereas Secretary Griswold publicly stated in a press release dated December 28th, 2023, that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection and was disqualified under the Constitution from the Colorado ballot, the Colorado Supreme Court got it right. So, if you really want to talk about what an unbiased Secretary of State should be, somebody who's responsible for making sure that people are on the ballot or not under the Constitution, for her to publicly state that, and of course to be totally wrong on it, but nonetheless, there's another one here. Secretary Griswold publicly stated on the social media platform X on December 22nd, 2023, quote, "I agree with the Colorado Supreme Court's ruling. Insurrectionists like Donald Trump shouldn't be eligible for office," end quote. So there you go. You have Secretary Griswold passing along misinformation to the public, and of course using her platform as Secretary of State to do so, and pushing that way. So of course, we know this isn't going anywhere, but hopefully it's another thorn in the side of Griswold's political career.
I've got plenty of issues with Trump. He was not the perfect president. There hasn't been a perfect president. The only thing I want them to show us is where specifically he told the protesters on January 6th to go and overthrow the government and create a brand new government, because that's an insurrection. Until they can show me that, I don't see where he committed an insurrection. So if we can get an answer on that, I would like to see it, but I don't think we're going to see an answer on that question. So, and I
Oh,
think that's
definitely. Yeah.
and that's why I think she should be impeached. She is playing games and interfering in the election.
Definitely, definitely. Griswold has definitely used her office to do that for many years now. So very unfortunate that she uses her elected position for political purposes, but nonetheless, that's the name of the game. So if you want to follow along to the fun on Tuesday, tune in to the House Judiciary Committee in the Old State Library at 1:30 p.m. You can listen online, you can show up in person. From everything I understand, there's not an opportunity for public testimony. From what I understand, I think because it's just a resolution, it's not a piece of legislation. That's how I interpret it, at least. But it does say for action only in the committee hearing calendar. So I think the bill sponsors, the Republicans, will definitely have their day to call out Griswold and have their voice heard. So follow along and show up if you're so inclined. So that's Tuesday. Also in the House Judiciary Committee, a really important bill, a very interesting one. And I say important almost tongue in cheek because it's another bill that's destined to die. It's not going anywhere, but House Bill 1303, the Colorado Open Meetings Law for the General Assembly. So House Judiciary should be very interesting on Tuesday. Not only are they going to hear testimony about impeaching Jenna Griswold, but you're going to hear Elizabeth Epps, representative, who definitely doesn't hold her tongue, who speaks her mind and doesn't care if she has to fight against her own caucus to say what she believes to be true. Putting forth legislation to make sure that open meeting laws apply to the General Assembly. Got to applaud here. It seems like a good bill. Uh, Unfortunately, the Democratic majority has been moving in the opposite direction, reducing transparency, hiding information from the public, and doing everything they can to avoid core requests. So Elizabeth Epps is at least on the right side here, I would say. Just to
Agree.
give people, yeah, go ahead.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead, Natalie.
No, I was just going to say you're going into the fiscal note that lays it out nicely. That there's plenty of good in this bill.
Yes, definitely, definitely. It's just a quick summary for those who don't know. If you're new, you're looking at a bill information on the legislative website. If it has a fiscal note, click on that. It's a great place to start. It's usually a little bit more uh, easy to read, not so archaic language of the legalese, but fiscal notes give you a lot of information. They tell you how much money is being spent if this bill passes and what it would do. But the summaries are often a lot more helpful than just trying to decipher the bill text yourself. So this bill, just to read through it quickly, for purposes of applying the Colorado Opens Meeting Law to public bodies of the General Assembly, the bill would make the following changes. Establishing that a political caucus is a public body and subject to meeting notification requirements, prohibits serial meetings as a violation of open meetings law, clarifies that electronic written communication between two or more members of the General Assembly is not a meeting subject to open meeting requirements, although the communication may still be subject to quora requests, prohibits electronic written communication exchange between a quorum that occurs at the same time as a meeting concerning public business, requires the notice of a meeting to identify any relevant statutory provisions governing the notice, requires minutes of a meeting to include the names of the members in attendance, specify if attendance was in person or a remote or a hybrid, and note if a recording of the meeting was made. So I know, I'm sure a lot of legislators, a lot of people might say, well, these caucus meetings are more political in nature. They're not necessarily subject to some of these open meetings. That'd be some of the criticism, I think. But nonetheless, if they're acting elected officials or elected representatives, then they really should be subject to the public's scrutiny, really.
Well, and as a reminder, it was Elizabeth Epps who sued over violation of secret meetings, secret voting. I mean, there's been this historical trend, as you noted, that they're trying to get away from the Colorado Open Meetings Law. So I don't know how I'll make it to testify, but I certainly would like to support her in what she's trying to do here. Anybody who turns out, does the right thing, gets the wrath of her party, although I don't know that she's ever hung real tight there. Gotta love that.
Definitely. Yeah. Epps definitely deserves the applause for this legislation and her ability to push back. I mean, definitely an individual down there, not just a member of her caucus or party. So the ability that she has to push back and got stripped of her committee assignments, gets changed her office room. I mean, she's been definitely Speaker McCluskey's definitely put her Elizabeth Epps in a punitive type of position because of her outspoken behavior, including the lawsuit against the speaker herself. So it's interesting to see that going back and forth between Elizabeth Epps and the rest of her caucus there. So
And
interesting bill.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
still give her a thumbs up because she voted to re-taber under Bockenfeld's bill, and that deserves like more than one day of applause there.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Natalie. It's a bill we talked about a month ago or so, 2 months ago now, probably maybe even 3 months ago. But a good bill that would have required voter approval to override the Tabor restrictions in local municipalities that maybe have done it a long time ago, and now there's a whole new voting base there. Bockenfeld had a great bill earlier this year to restore those taxpayer protections, and Elizabeth Epps voted in favor of it. So credit where credit is due.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody interested, Tuesday in the Old State Library, 1:30 p.m. Show up and speak out, have your voice heard, and we'll see how this one goes. Kind of know where it's going to go. No other sponsors on the bill except for Epps, so bad sign there. But nonetheless, maybe she'll have some good sound bites about going after her own caucus and the speaker for fighting against transparency. So interesting bill. Moving on Tuesday, now moving to the Senate Finance Committee. Gosh, unbelievable in Colorado that we have, we have this amazing craft beer industry. Of course, Coors, there's so much beer, there's so much alcohol. Colorado's winning awards all the time for the hard alcohol, for beer, everything. And of course, we have legal cannabis, but on alcohol specifically, we're kind of moving in the wrong direction with some of these bills being introduced. So Senate Bill 181 is a bad bill. It's an anti-alcohol bill that's going to create new taxes. That's right, taxes on alcohol in Colorado. Uh, Bad legislation for many reasons. So Senate Bill 181, Alcohol Impact and Recovery Enterprise. Now, if you've tuned in before, you know that word enterprise is one of those key words you want to watch out for. That means it's a government entity designed to circumvent Tabor, because if it was a tax, it'd be subject to the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and the voters of Colorado would have to approve it. They'd have to approve raising taxes on alcohol. We know where that would go. They probably wouldn't do it because we've seen other ballot initiatives that are pro alcohol loosening those laws over the last few years. So, of course, these legislators, Priola Hanson, DeGray Kennedy, Amabile, come up with this idea of an enterprise. It's been going on for a long time with the hospital provider fees and this and that. But it's a way for them to say, hey, we're collecting a fee. You got to pay a fee. It's not a tax, it's a fee on alcohol manufacturer in Colorado. So this bill would collect a fee from manufacturers and wholesalers that distribute alcohol within Colorado. But don't worry, these legislators are going to solve the alcohol issues because this fee is going to go to disorder prevention, early intervention, treatment, harm reduction, and recovery services and programs and communities throughout the state. So totally ridiculous. Bad bill in multiple ways. Raising taxes on alcohol is not going to necessarily be a good thing, in my opinion, from a pro-liberty perspective. And then, of course, circumventing the Taxpayer Bill of Rights by creating the state enterprise where they can collect more money and get around calling it a tax.
What
Life
did you
is
say in reference to Tabor, though? I missed that part.
Yeah, Jody. So Tabor, the Colorado Taxpayer Bill of Rights,
Right.
requires that if legislators want to raise taxes, that the voters have to approve it. So the voters of Colorado would, so say
Right.
they put this on the ballot, voters of Colorado would have to say, yeah, we're going to agree to raise taxes. Voters do not have to approve a fee from an enterprise. So this is their little tricky workaround, which should be illegal. Unfortunately, the courts have not agreed with that. But creating this fee to say, you owe us a fee instead of a tax. And there you go.
But this doesn't affect our Tabor.
This, go ahead, Natalie.
Well, an enterprise is supposed to be like a self-sustaining business, and they're using this to skirt Tabor and ask for a tax increase by saying there's this business over here called the Alcohol Impact and Recovery Enterprise, and because of that claim, the revenue will be taken from people's pocket without their consent, but it doesn't get included in the Tabor cap.
You hit it in the nail. Okay, without the consent. I get you now. Thank you very much. Sorry for that.
Yeah, and go back one page. What was that total on that? That's $120 million there that they're going to take. And this bill also, it picks winners and losers. It's tax-feeing, big alcohol companies, but it has exemptions for small ones. And still, $120 million out of taxpayers' pockets without their consent. And look at the amount of employees we're adding there for this. No wonder we add up.
Oh my.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Bad bill. Michael, what were you going to say?
I think you guys pretty much covered it all. I mean, it's absolute. This is just a ridiculous bill. The idea that, I mean, I just want to go back to the whole enterprise thing. Enterprises, if they worked as well as they should, they would generate revenue on their own, but instead they have to use the government to impose whatever fees they want to do. It's not tax this time, it's a fee. So I think it's wild that Colorado's starting to go this route where they're trying to add fee after fee after fee. And I get why they're trying to do it. They're trying to skirt, like we said, Tabor, but it's still absolutely ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous. Should be unconstitutional and is definitely an affront to adults all across the state who want to have alcohol on their own decisions. So there's another reason to check out fiscal notes here is because they do have some background information often. So there's a little bit of a paragraph here about what enterprises are, Proposition 117, some of the history and background there. So if you're interested, click into this bill.
Go back to where it's saying there's talking about also, here's another, just they subvert the voters. They don't listen. Prop 117 was passed, which is supposed to mean collections over 100 million in these enterprises, these so-called enterprises, need to be approved by voters. And that's over the first 5 years, right? And this bill's bringing in 120 million in just 1 year.
Good
Sorry,
point.
I know we don't get a curse on the show, do we?
That's a good point.
Please keep the cursing to a minimum if at all possible, please.
The FCC or whoever's regulating us won't be happy, but that's baloney. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. But don't worry. This bill exempts the new alcohol impact and recovery enterprise from this requirement, of course. So, of course it does. Of course it does.
How do they do that? How is an exemption? Where was the paperwork on that one? All right.
So, bad bill, really bad bill. Of course, they're going after alcohol. It's not the only anti-alcohol bill. We'll talk about another one later, but it is being heard this week, Senate Bill 181. In the Finance Committee, Senate Committee Room 357 at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. So if you're in the alcohol industry, if you want to have a voice, show up, speak out, get involved. Definitely reach out to those committee members on the Finance Committee. This isn't the most hot button issue, but if these legislators get some pressure and know that the voters are watching them in this contentious election year, you could have some influence. All right, so that's what we got for Tuesday. So feel free, people, take screenshots, look at this information, leave comments on the YouTube or on Twitter for Free State Colorado or Michael Vance or Libertarian Party of Colorado. Definitely happy to follow up with any other questions that people have out there. So we're going to move on to the heavier days of the week, Wednesday and Thursday. So some really egregious, horrible, anti-liberty bills being heard this last half of the week here. First one we'll talk about on Wednesday is House Bill 1356, something we have mentioned before, but it is getting this committee hearing this week. The sale of unauthorized electronic smoking devices. So, hey, you thought that you don't drink alcohol, maybe a smoke. Well, hey, you're in their crosshairs also, people here. So they're going after, of course, anybody they can. But Leslie Herod thinks it's a good idea to amend the Colorado Consumer Protection Act to make the sale of electronic smoking devices that have not received authorization by the FDA an unfair or deceptive trade practice. So there you go. That means your vaping equipment, which you can legally buy to smoke tobacco or maybe cannabis. I think it's mostly tobacco, but nonetheless, some of those devices might be the same. Are going to be outlawed, illegal in Colorado unless they have FDA approval. I mean, we know how corrupt and how wrong the FDA is on so many issues. So to think that they have to be the arbiter of what electronic smoking devices the people of Colorado can and cannot use is absolutely egregious. Looking at the bill, Herod is the only sponsor on the bill. So I do take that as a good sign that nobody else is interested in carrying this forward. So hopefully that's a good sign that this bill is not going anywhere. Oops, didn't mean to click out of it there, but nonetheless, House Business Affairs and Labor Committee on Wednesday. Bad bill. That's Wednesday, April 10th, upon adjournment of the House Committee Room 112 in the state capitol. So pay attention to that one. If you're interested or show up, speak out, reach out to the members of the committee, tell them how bad this bill is. All right, moving on here. Gosh, I don't know about you guys, but ticket prices are bad, right? Ticket prices are tough. Anybody who wants to go see Taylor Swift or whatever, the state government's going to solve your problem. The state government's going to come in there and get rid of, these bad actors who are violating consumer protection norms and create this new law. And again, they're going to save us all. So House Bill 1378, this consumer protection in event ticket sales, is pretty dumb, if you ask me, pretty unnecessary. I think that creating new requirements, new regulations around this, the process of selling and buying tickets is obviously going to increase costs and decrease availability. I mean, it's going to be harder for resellers, for individuals to move tickets, and of course, another opportunity for these costs to go up. So, of course, consumer protection laws regarding ticket sales and resales for events would require operators and resellers to guarantee refunds to purchasers of tickets under certain circumstances that the government decides. The bill would prohibit an operator from denying an individual access to an event because the individual's ticket was bought through a reseller. So there you go. Now you have people checking the tickets on the hook here under this new law. So a person would be engaging in a deceptive trade practice when in the course of their business, vocation, or occupation, they display trademarked, copyrighted, or substantially similar web designs, URLs, or other images to mislead a purchaser, or they sell a ticket to an event without disclosing the total cost, including the cost of any service charge or other fees that must be paid, or displays service charges and fees less prominently than the total price of the ticket, or increases the price of a ticket once the ticket has been selected for purchase with the exception of adding delivery fees. So there's a lot in this bill. I think it's pretty ridiculous that the state government thinks that getting involved in ticket sales. Of course, we've seen the Attorney General, Phil Weiser, go after ticket sales, online ticket sales in the past, but just another example of how the government thinks they can solve all of our problems and most likely are just going to make it easier for the big conglomerates to operate, big corporate ticket companies, and make it harder for everybody else.
I see a couple of little good things in this bill. Once I tried to sell, somebody gave me Nuggets tickets. I was in the parking lot trying to sell them less than face value, and the cops pulled me in for what they call huckstering. So, this is kind of related to that, in that it's saying you cannot prohibit somebody from getting into an event if they bought it through a reseller. So once you've bought a ticket, shouldn't you be able to resell it? So without digging into a lot of details on this one, it's sad that government even has to get in the middle of something, but I'd have to look at the bill a little bit closer. But I always do like to talk about my Nuggets story, which I thought was pretty amusing. I mean, it wasn't even above the price. It was below, and it took 3 cops. And I didn't
What a
even
great
want to go
story.
to, yeah,
I bet you
Natalie,
felt pretty powerful to have to require 3 cops to take you down, Natalie.
I had that happen in Longmont too when we were trying to repeal the grocery tax. Actually, that was more like 5. But anyway, but we won. You're allowed to petition. Anyway, okay.
nice. So Natalie, I understand. There's some issues out there in the world related to ticket sales, some problems, and maybe there's some good that can come of legislation like this. However, I'm pretty skeptical to think that the government's going to solve any of these problems out there and are going to somehow, protect people from buying the right kind of tickets. But appreciate your perspective, appreciate your input there.
I just wanted to keep you on your toes, Brandon. That's all.
I like the story.
Definitely appreciate it. Appreciate it. Wednesday, April 10th, upon adjournment, House Committee Room 112, the Business Affairs and Labor Committee is where this is going to be heard. It's first committee hearing for the bill, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, if you've ever been arrested as a huckster, you might want to support this bill. Otherwise, if you're a free market libertarian type, maybe not. I don't know. So we'll see.
Ooh, that hurt. We'll see
Oh
what
no,
happens to that later.
yeah, no, you can't question your credentials there, Natalie. I'm just just teasing you.
I love it.
All right. So bad bill we've talked about plenty of times. Senate Bill 3 in the House Judiciary Committee, one of 2 bills we're going to talk about this week in the House Judiciary Committee this Wednesday. Senate Bill 3, you can often tell the priority of a bill by how early it was introduced. So Senate Bill 3 was the first anti-gun bill introduced this year. Definitely a priority for these anti-gun Democrats, Tom Sullivan in particular, and Monica Duran, to try and give the state government what has now been amended to $1.5 million to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. So the opposite of defunding the police. Apparently, they love funding the police when they're anti-gun police, giving them $1.5 million to go after people who are flaunting Colorado's ridiculous unconstitutional firearms laws, such as magazine bans and other such nonsense. So bill has gone through some amendments. For those interested, since last time we've talked about it, you can see the italicized text here on the page kind of shows that the changes to the bill. Nonetheless, a bad bill designed to target gun stores who maybe are selling things they shouldn't, even though there's pending legislation to possibly overturn those laws. Looking at the bill history, this bill did go through the Senate. So the Senate is somewhat considered the more conservative, if you can even call it that, or more cautious chamber compared to the House. The House has all the Democratic Socialists, as you probably know. So going through the House, I can't imagine that anybody's going to try and stop it. The Senate did amend it to try and make it a little bit more palatable and less restrictive, I guess, is a way to put it. So here it comes through the House process. So at least one more opportunity for individuals to testify against this bill to show up and speak out and have your voice heard. And that's going to be on Wednesday, April 10th in the Judiciary Committee in the Old State Library at 1:30 p.m.
Hey, one thing I want to point out, I was just thinking about, how we talk about gun control being racist, it has racist roots, it's a form of systemic racism, etc. And then you've got people like, our buddy Stephen Woodrow, who likes to point out that, the party's flipped, etc. If the party's actually flipped, why are the Democrats still anti-gun? Just want to throw that out there real quick.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good questions about that. I mean, of course, on the race angle or the criminal justice reform angle that the Democrats were so big on during the George Floyd era, the Black Lives Matter stuff. Now, of course, they're pushing more and more opportunities for police to have encounters with individuals of color, possibly creating extremely dangerous situations like we saw with the driving bill. All these gun bills are going to lead to more, people in minority communities getting harassed, arrested, and possibly killed by law enforcement. I mean, that's the reality to it. I think the anti-gun Democrats would probably say that's the price to pay if it means we have a gun-free society. I don't think they'd bat an eye at that kind of thing, unfortunately.
I think you're right.
So bad bill. Hopefully, it's going there. I mean, it's going to pass. I can't imagine it wouldn't, but 1.5 million from our state government general fund there to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Just another example of why efforts to reduce the income tax, to reduce our taxes overall, and to protect Tabor. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights are so important because if the government doesn't have the money to infringe on our rights because Tabor's preventing them from over collecting, then they don't have this kind of money to spend to throw around. So just another people say, well, what can we do to fight this? Well, hey, stand up for Tabor, stand up for lowering the income tax, stand up for taking the resources away from our government who's going to use it to violate your rights and come after peaceful gun owners. The other bill in the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday, pretty interesting one. Interesting bill, of course, uh, high interest loan places, the places where you can cash your paycheck and get a payday loan and have outrageous interest. They get a bad rap. Probably not a financially great decision for people, but hey, let the market decide, let individuals make their own choices, let people do what they want in terms of interacting with these credit agencies. But of course, Javier Marbre, Democratic Socialist of America, somebody who is trying to fight for the working class and go after these bad debt collectors, these people who, you owe them money, but hey, they shouldn't have to, we got to stand up for the people who are owing money to everybody. So this bill is creating more regulation of debt related services. So of course, we know that this is going to mean there's going to be less uh, of these high interest loan debt collector agencies, debt collection in general, less opportunities for people to loan out money because it's going to be harder to get that money back now. It's going to be harder to get that money back. Let's just look at the fiscal. This is a long bill summary, a lot of stuff on there. Just looking at the fiscal note real quick to give people an idea. The bill establishes new regulatory protections under the Consumer Credit Code related to credit and debt management services and creates new deceptive trade practices. So credit service organizations will have to file a notification and pay a fee to the Attorney General's office within 30 days of commencing business in Colorado and annually thereafter. The administrator of the Uniform Consumer Credit Code may also order a person to cease and desist from engaging in violations of the Colorado Credit Service Organization Act, and then they have some penalties. So it's a deceptive trade practice if you take any legal action on a debt against a consumer, if the debt collector or collection agency is the named plaintiff, unless the debt collector or collection agency has purchased complete ownership of the debt, seeking or supporting a warrant or otherwise promoting the arrest of a detainment of a consumer and any legal action against the consumer in connection with an action to collect or attempt to collect a debt. So really, it's a lot of mumbo jumbo here, but the reality is it's making it easier for the people who have debts and going after the people trying to collect the debts. So you can understand what kind of a society that creates, what kind of incentives are being put to say, people go get in debt, and if you don't pay it back, or the people coming after you, they're the ones we're going after. So interesting bill, a little bit of nuance to it, but nonetheless, a bad piece of legislation that's going to make it easier for people to be debtors, not pay their debts, and make it harder for debt to be collected. And there you go.
I wonder if this is going to be a basis for that debt grading that they're starting on people. Did the new debt grading that they're going to start doing on your credit score? I wonder if it's going to be related to that.
It's very interesting. Could be. I mean, there's a lot going on with credit scores, and I would not be surprised if we see more information on credit scores. I mean, if you're a creditor, if you're a bank or a credit union, you want as much information as possible, and you're probably gonna be a little more strict. You're gonna be a little more strict with your standards if it's gonna be harder to collect that debt from people, right? So, definitely.
I'm thinking of the actual access to being able to purchase a home. They're doing this new grading on the scoring now for even buying a home, buying a car. It just dawned on me. I'm just thinking that way.
Well, if it's JV Mabry, for me, it would be concealing concerns on a debt history or credit if it's him.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know the stuff you're talking about, Jody, though.
No, there's just a new grading score that's going in federally. And it's just making, because I was a mortgage broker. So I was just thinking that way. I'm sorry.
No, you might be right. I don't know. But for JVR, I would think it's concealing.
Yeah.
Get an A, B, or C.
No, definitely appreciate everybody's input on this. It's a weird industry, or an interesting industry with a lot of nuance to it. But yeah, knowing Marbury and Lewis and Cutter and the legislation they push, it's definitely not in the best interest of the people trying to collect that debt. I'll tell you that. All right, so that was a House Judiciary Committee, two bad bills there. Interesting bill, House Bill 1239 on Wednesday in the House Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee. A bill we have talked about in the past, the bill the firefighters are against, basically overriding local housing code, a pattern we've seen over the past few years. Unfortunately, instead of letting local municipalities, local governments make their own decisions in terms of how many stairways houses should have, the state wants to come in under Kevin Priola and Valdez to push uniform building code across the state, saying that you can have a single exit stairway in a multifamily structure. Of course, firefighters are concerned that this is going to make it a lot harder for people to get out of these buildings if there is a fire. So, it's an interesting take. Maybe Michael, I'd love to see your input on that. It's an interesting take from a libertarian perspective, where you say, "Hey, this is maybe a good bill because we're going to remove these local restrictions. These local restrictions are preventing people from building things." But then the flip side of that argument, I would say, is, well, hey, it's a top-down, centrally planned, state-managed override of local housing code. And I see decentralization as a better aspect, but some people say, no, if the state at the top can deregulate industries and deregulate local communities, it's a good thing. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that, Michael, as the legislative director of the Libertarian Party of Colorado.
I think it's an interesting take. I mean, I think it's a very convoluted as well. I mean, definitely, I want to see the state not interfere in this. But at the same time, I mean, I do think it's probably wise to, if you're gonna build a home or build a multifamily structure, I used to be an engineer for telecom on MDUs specifically. It's wise to build a multifamily structure, particularly if you got high rise, especially in a place like Denver, with more than one stairwell, so that way somebody gets out. Because could you imagine if there's a fire in the stairwell? I mean, everybody's going to end up getting cooked. So it's not a wise decision. I would like to see something like this, but I'd like to see it happen. I'd like to see something like this happen on a local level. I do not want to see the government coming down and imposing its thumb on everybody with a bill like this. Do it at the local level if you're going to do it. I'd still rather not see it happen at all, but it is what it is. Also, it's a apartment complex is a two-way street. If you don't feel safe in a complex, you should not at all move into that complex. You should not sign that lease either. That's another factor that nobody really thinks about, is their own personal responsibility. You're responsible for yourself. Nobody else is responsible for you and the decisions you make and how safe you want to live. If you want to live in a house like that, you should be able to live in a house like that. If you have less exits and it's cheaper and you want to take that risk, go for it. It's your life. It's not anybody else's, and you should not impose your safety on everybody else's. So
Nice. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, definitely appreciate the input. I mean, it's very interesting. It seems to be more of an engineering question in terms of, trying to develop the proper, safe, functional way to have a building set up. But of course, the government wants to have their say and try and make it the same across the entire state, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's something that can be answered in the free market better than from way up high in a government imposed style.
Well, I really expect we'll see some amendments to this bill. So it was introduced back on 212. It was supposed to be in committee a month ago, almost a month ago on 319. That's when we talked about it last, but got delayed. So I think because of the pushback from local fire departments, maybe from local communities, I'd expect to see some bill amendments come to this bill once it's introduced, and we'll see how it goes. But it'll be interesting. Interesting bill. April 10th, Wednesday, in the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee, 1:30 p.m. in the Legislative Service Building's Hearing Room A. So tune in or show up for those interested on this bill. But let's go ahead and move on here. Unfortunately, a bad bill from Mike Lynch. We've talked about it before. It's a bad bill trying to really limit free speech on outdoor advertising to make it comply with the federal government's requirements to get money So again, we see another example of how governments use that carrot instead of the stick sometimes of trying to offer money to people to say, hey, listen, you want this highway money, your outdoor advertising need to qualify under our guidelines. So Mike Lynch, says that's a good idea. So a bill that does have some First Amendment implications, as well as, some basically trying to comply with what the federal government's trying to do isn't necessarily always a good thing. So bad bill, interesting that it was introduced before and delayed. Last time we talked about it as well. So this bill has been pushed back, so we'll see what comes of it. He doesn't have any co-sponsors, so we'll see on this bill at all. But Wednesday, April 10th, in the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee, also in that LSB room A at 1:30 p.m. All right, good. Several more to talk about here, but our last one for Wednesday. Thankfully, we have such wonderful state legislators who are going to prevent people from being bullied based on their weight. If this bill passes, right? I mean, that's all I can imagine that Bob Gardner, Janice Marchman, and Eliza Hamrick think is going to happen. That these politicians sitting in Denver are going to be able to stop some bully at some school somewhere is one of the most ridiculous things I can think of, and absurd and comical. So current law identifies bullying behaviors that are subject to school district and charter school discipline policies and reporting requirements. This bill is going to add a pattern of bullying based on weight, height, or body size to the prohibited bullying behaviors. So that's right, folks. If you didn't know, there are prohibited bullying behaviors in Colorado's public schools. And if this bill passes, weight, height, and body size will be added to that list. So, thank these legislators. They're going to totally get rid of bullying. It did pass the House already. So there you go. I guess a non-controversial bill. Why not pass it? I guess if you're these legislators, but it got through the House through March and is now moving on to the Senate and the Senate Education Committee. So ridiculous bill Wednesday, April 10th. Obviously not an egregious bill compared to some of the stuff we talk about every week, but I just love pointing out when the government does stuff like this because it is interesting to see their hubris and their ideas behind what they're trying to do down there. So that's what we got for Wednesday. Wednesday bills. Moving on to Thursday, the last day for committee hearings this week. Got a whole list here. Happy to start off with a good bill, House Bill 1156. This bill would allow basically more alcohol permits for special events. So there you go. Good bipartisan bill. I'm sure will pass because it's been amended a whole bunch. But the Chamber of Commerce can have a special alcohol permit for their little parties and events. So good bill. Doesn't affect a lot of people, doesn't make a big difference, but nonetheless, I'm always happy to say we have a pro-liberty bill out there, even if it's the most minimal type of change to state statute there is. So there you go. There you go. And House Bill 1156 being heard on a Thursday, April 11th in the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee upon adjournment in the old Supreme Court.
Minute differences are how we lose our rights, but also minute differences are how we can retain our rights. So a good bill is a good bill.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point, Michael. I think there's some opportunity around alcohol. We've seen it in the past where grocery stores can now sell wine. Gas stations can sell beer and wine as well. I mean, we've slowly been moving in Colorado towards a little bit more pro-alcohol, like kind of liberalization, I guess, if you will. So it's a step in the right direction. I think for libertarians, liberty activists, anybody who likes freedom, working on those small little issues is a good path forward. It's still a win, right?
Absolutely. That being said, there is a measure. I don't know if it's a ballot initiative or if it's an upcoming bill where they're trying to limit. I think it might be an upcoming ballot initiative where they're trying to limit alcohol sales in grocery stores. So
yes, I have that. I added that to our list of bills to watch. So we'll talk about that here towards the end.
Perfect.
Horrible bill. This is an interesting bill. The next one, 1121, something that's kind of divided a lot of people in the liberty community or just people in general. I think it's a bad bill. I think it's bad to require manufacturers of digital equipment to have to share their software, schematics, or parts or plans to people. I think that's going to have some negative implications in the market, meaning that maybe we have less advanced digital electronic equipment available to people in Colorado as opposed to other states. I think that's a bad thing. But nonetheless, I know some people really do support that right to repair movement. So this bill would require manufacturers of digital electronic equipment to facilitate the repair of its equipment by providing certain other persons with the resources needed to repair that digital electronic equipment. So we did see wheelchairs and agriculture equipment be passed in the previous sessions. We've seen that in the past, but this would move on, expanding that right to repair statute to digital electronic equipment and adding exemptions for certain types of equipment. So here's where they carve out the winners and losers. They carve out special interests. So let me see if I can actually make this a little bigger there. So vessels, aviation, motor vehicles, medical devices, other than powered wheelchairs, safety communications equipment. So, here's the list of some companies this isn't going to apply to. So we see the state legislature kind of carving out who has the opportunity to not have to follow along with these laws. And then, of course, everybody else has to. So for digital equipment manufactured and sold or used in the state of Colorado after January 1st, 2025, the manufacturer shall not use parts pairing to prevent an independent repair provider or owner from installing or enabling an otherwise functional replacement part, reduce the functionality or performance of digital electronic equipment, or cause digital electronic equipment to display misleading alerts or warnings about unidentified parts. So, the bill has been watered down quite a bit, but nonetheless, I'd be concerned. Maybe you have a manufacturer of a cell phone, for example, that they don't make all those components themselves. They don't necessarily have the ability to get those ways to repair that equipment because they're buying it from another company. Now maybe they can't use those parts on what they sell in Colorado because nobody has access to the software, the ability to get it repaired. I can see some potential implications that this would be a bad bill.
Wouldn't this be the problem that they're experiencing because they want everybody to buy G5 electronic devices instead of staying into the older?
Hey, that's a good point, Jody, that, trying to get people to buy certain types of electronic equipment that better facilitate the government's plans for the kind of society they want to build. You can see
That's
that kind of
right.
thing happening with this. We have a special guest joining us here, the Mayor Aaron Lamb of Keensburg. I know he's has a take, has some thoughts on the right to repair movement. So I'd love to hear what you have to say, Mr. Mayor.
No, well, thank you for having me. I mean, what don't I have a take on, to be honest? But yeah, I definitely feel strongly about this. I agree with you that this is something that is a bit controversial, let's say, within the libertarian movement and liberty movement, more broadly speaking. I do think that ultimately, this idea of right to repair should be a good thing. Again, I'm not convinced at this point enough to make recommendation one way or the other about how anyone else should vote on this one. But I do know, for instance, a couple of years back, Apple specifically, it wasn't even that they weren't providing the parts. It was that they had software that prevented, if you bought two brand new iPhones and you took the camera out of one and put it into the other, then that would not work whatsoever. So I think that was kind of the impetus for a lot of this right to repair movement, of course, with John Deere being another great example of that, in the historically just being terrible in that area. So I like this idea ultimately, and but again, it should be on the manufacturers to offer that product to the people. And there's a computer manufacturer, I can't recall the name of it right now, but that's their entire business model, is that 100% of their computers are replaceable. They sell all the parts, you can upgrade it, you can buy your same system now, and in 10 years be using the same bones of it and have replaced every single part inside if you wanted. So I think that's the better option for sure. But yeah, this right to repair, I think, is a really interesting topic.
Definitely, yeah. Just looking at the summary of the legislation here in the fiscal note, that these manufacturers would have to provide documentation, software, data, and other tools upon request to equipment owners and independent repair providers to facilitate the repair of a manufactured good. It seems so broad, it seems so, I had very serious concerns, I want to repair my laptop that I'm doing this video on, but, the company that made the laptop, they outsource a lot of those components. They don't necessarily have them themselves. So now, how far does it go where that company has to then provide it and then they can't sell in Colorado because they're going to get hit with a fine? If you see the penalty here for violating, it's $20,000 for each violation. So, that adds up quick. If they sell a couple hundred of these devices in Colorado, a couple thousand, you get a class action going. Now they're being hit for 20,000 for each violation. So definitely understand the concern, especially with, like you said, the John Deere and some of the other equipment for, not being useful and trying to, kind of rig the market to protect themselves against consumers and competition. But nonetheless, yeah, like you said, it's not the government's not going to solve the problem if you ask me. Perfect. Any other takes? Any other talk on this bill? All right. So House Bill 1121, the consumer right to repair digital electronic equipment. For those who know Titione, that person has been one of the sponsors for both of those bills that have passed in the past, but the agricultural one and the others, of course, Woodrow, Bridges, Henriksen. I mean, looking at those names, it's hard to want to say this is going to be a good bill, just knowing those legislators and kind of the legislation that they push. So another reason to potentially be skeptical. Nonetheless, this bill has made it through the entire House. It did pass the House with those amendments and is now going into the Senate. So this will be its first committee hearing in the Senate. We'll see if there's more amendments, more changes to it, or if it gets stopped. But my guess is it's going to pass in some form or another. So Thursday, April 11th, in the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee, upon adjournment in the old Supreme Court. That's in the state capitol building. Check that out. Show up, speak out if you're interested, or at least tune in and follow along on the website. You can follow along on the legislative website and listen to that committee hearing. All right, so a couple more bills here for the week. Thursday, one I wanted to bring up and point out because it's one of the first pieces of legislation we've seen this year having to do with a bill that or proposition that passed last year to create a new market here in Colorado for psychedelics. So your magic mushrooms and all the like. Very interesting ballot measure that passed last year. And now we're seeing how the state legislature is going to implement that and how they're going to create the guardrails, the regulations, and the whole system around this new economy related to natural medicines and psychedelic medicine. So whether it's a good bill or not, hard to say exactly. Probably a bad bill, just knowing that the government's going to create more regulation than is probably necessary around this issue. But I just wanted to point it out and bring it up as something that people should be aware of if you are interested in the burgeoning psychedelic market here in Colorado or interested in this issue at all. So Senate Bill 198, the regulated natural medicine implementation, is going to be heard in the Finance Committee, Senate Committee Room 357, upon adjournment of the Senate on April 11th. This is the first time the bill is being heard, so it'll be interesting to see what happens to it. But we know there's going to be some sort of regulatory framework one way or the other. It's just going to depend what that's going to look like. So there's going to be some version of this bill and other type of legislation around this issue passed for sure.
Brandon, I haven't looked too much into this one. Is it unreasonable to expect that they're just going to mirror the marijuana system that they have?
I think that's very reasonable. That's definitely going to be the kind of the what do you call it? Like not the template, I guess you'd say, except for the point of they're not actually going to have retail sales at this point. So eliminating that. But in terms of the regulatory structure through the Department of Revenue and creating a new organization, marijuana is the MED, Marijuana Enforcement Division of the Department of Revenue for Colorado. I'm sure they're going to create a new department there, or they might have already done so, and create that regulatory structure, and then start implementing rules around this new thing here in Colorado. So, yeah.
And a few enterprises to make it all happy.
Are there enterprises associated with this?
No, I'm saying there will be, I'm sure.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. So yeah, people interested, definitely dive into this bill. Pay attention to what's going on because it's going to be a massive, incredible money-making opportunity at some point in the future too. So Thursday and the Finance Committee upon adjournment, Senate Committee Room 357. So check that out for those interested. All right, next on the list and one of the controversial bills having to do with affirming gender care, affirming the gender stuff, House Bill 1170, Rights for Youth Division of Youth Service Facilities. So, the youths who are in the juvenile facilities all over, affirming their gender choices and potentially getting them on drugs and surgeries and stuff like that. That's one of the primary concerns I've heard about this bill is this Bill of Rights for youth who are going to be under, God help them, the responsibility of the Department of Human Services and giving them those different opportunities to act out gender expression. Of course, there's a lot of concerns. I know people have talked about that in the past, that some of these poor kids get into some of these programs, maybe have an adult who's not acting in their best interest, who's trying to maybe manipulate them or groom them, and then uses now these new protections under the law to kind of put them in a bad position. So that's some of the serious concerns with this bill that I've heard, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes. This bill has been through the House. It did pass the House, so on to the Senate and the Health and Human Services Committee on Thursday, Senate Committee Room 357 at 1:30 p.m.
Hope Rich gets better. Be nice to hear him talk a little bit about this. Yeah, this bill is a travesty. I mean, there not only is it a harmful to kids, but it's also a violation of the First Amendment. If you have specific religious issues with this bill, the government is going to compel your speech, compel you to abdicate your religious viewpoint. So, in order to serve these kids, and that is absolutely insane. So, there's a lot of issues with this bill.
Yeah, a lot of it having to do with that gender identity and really restricting an individual's ability to try and help these kids without having to fall into this gender ideology that you might not be interested in participating in. So definitely limiting the amount of individuals who are going to be able to help these kids who maybe are a bad decision. And then of course, hopefully not, but possibly opening up the door for some abuser to come in and put these kids in a bad position where they're getting them access to this gender affirming care under state purview. State's paying for it, taxpayers are paying for it. Now this kid could potentially have an issue for the rest of their lives. So definitely a scary bill for that issue for those concerned. So check that out on Thursday at 11 on Thursday, April 11th at 1:30 p.m. Senate Committee Room 357. So we'll go ahead and move on there to a couple bills in the Senate State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. Interesting to see them in that committee. For those who don't know, the Senate or the State Veterans and Military Affairs is generally the kill committee. Of course, there's some bills that should go into that committee because the purview of the bill has to do with state operations or something with veterans, something along those lines. However, the firearm storage and the concealed carry permits, I'm not sure that those would be in there, that they'd be in judiciary instead, but nonetheless, let's take a look. So, two bad anti-gun bills coming up this Thursday. House Bill 1348 to secure firearm storage in a vehicle. So they did amend this bill quite a bit. But basically, really trying to force people to use these locked boxes to put their guns in and creating these new fines of $500 if you have a firearm in your vehicle that's not locked up. Hey, it's your car. If you want to be able to have your gun however you want it, I think you should be able to. Um, bad bill. Bad bill
It's
made it all the way through the House. Go ahead.
Your vehicle's your domicile. You are absolutely correct. You should be able to do what you want with it to protect yourself, particularly when we have let so many different people come in this metro area. We don't know who they are. They weren't properly vetted before they came. And I'm not saying that there aren't people from domestically within America that weren't already a problem. Absolutely. You go downtown the last year, there's a lot of American citizens who you definitely want to protect yourself from. So, our city is the metro area is less safe. I don't want my family coming down to downtown unless we're going to an Avs game. As soon as we're done, we go back home. So, yeah, it's less safe. We should be allowed to, we shouldn't even have to be allowed to protect ourselves the way we want to in the manner that we want to as well. So, this is an absolutely ridiculous bill that's going to get people killed.
Definitely puts you in an unsafe situation where you don't have ready access to your firearm if you are in a dangerous situation, or you come up upon some criminals or they try and attack you or something like that. And then, of course, creating these new penalties for individuals who don't follow along with the law. So I imagine noncompliance will be high on something like this. Um, Very unfortunate that this bill has made it through the state house. It passed the House Judiciary Committee and then the House as a whole. So I was interested to see that the Senate did not introduce this to the Judiciary Committee. So I don't know that there's plans to stop this bill. I would think of all the anti-gun bills out there that this would be one of the ones that passes, would be my initial thoughts. But we'll have to see. Hopefully there's some good lobbying against towards these legislators who are in the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. And hopefully Colorado's pro-gun community shows up Thursday, April 11th at 1:30 p.m. in that old Supreme Court.
After you point out the second bill, I want you to hop into that specific committee and look at who one of the legislators is.
Perfect. So let's look at that second bill that's going to be heard in that committee on Thursday.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Does it say
How
it's
far
gonna
back?
be in a trunk? Go back to just, yeah. And the locked trunk, so it can't be visible?
Correct.
Yes. The bill prohibits
above, I
knowingly
see.
leaving.
In the locked
No,
in the first paragraph, right above what you're doing?
the bill prohibits knowingly leaving a handgun in an unattended vehicle unless the firearm is stored in a locked hard-sided container that is not left in plain view or that is in the locked trunk of a vehicle or a locked recreation vehicle.
Okay. I had to figure out how I
So-
was going to do that in a Geo Metro.
Just gotta
Yeah,
put
or
a
in a
blanket
Jeep.
over it. Yeah, I wanted just to add to what Michael said again. In Colorado, you don't have to have your concealed handgun permit to have a concealed handgun in your vehicle because it is considered domicile. So I believe that this is their first step, and of course, their ever-growing attempt to fully outlaw any kind of firearm is to set this precedent so that then they can get rid of the concealed handgun permit, that issue. But then they can also go after your home, and they can force us gun owners to safely store our firearms in all sorts of different manners with more expenses, and again tagging along with the insurance liability requirement that they're forcing as well. So I think again this is one part of their larger strategy to just completely attack all firearm owners in Colorado.
100%. I want to point out two other things. Look who the representative is. One of the representatives is Lorena Garcia. She went out on an all-out assault against people who want to. This is after testimony on HB 24-1292, which is the assault weapons ban. She had her little moment to give a screed, and she went on about 20 seconds about how it is toxically masculine to want to protect your family, and she outright called it evil. And in that same exact bill text, which was sponsored by EPS, unfortunately, who was amazing with the open records law bill we previously discussed, and Timmy Hamas Hernandez, they said this: the firearms industry has specifically marketed assault weapons as tactical, hyper-masculine, and military style in a manner that overtly appeals to the very people most likely to acquire such weapons as a means to gain infamy as a mass shooter. So it's all a part of gaslighting people as evil gun owners.
Definitely. No, I'm really glad you brought that up. These people will do everything they can to erode our ability to defend ourselves, to erode the ability for people to legally own firearms. It's just part of the package. That's the Democrats know you fight where you can win. They know they can't repeal the Second Amendment, but they fight where they can win. So they pick all these little ways to chip away at it and do everything they can.
And it's not even that. They want to gaslight you as a human being and strip away your human dignity, while at the same time claiming to support human dignity in a lot of these other bills and what they've said on the floor during this legislative session.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, definitely. And EPS is a co-sponsor on this bill too. So for all the good she did on the open records, of course, she's an anti-gun extremist down there in the state capitol.
Well, I'm going to give her grief next time I see her.
Please do.
I will. I will.
So the other anti-gun bill being heard in that same committee hearing is the concealed carry permits and training bill. Very, very egregious bill. So here's basically two examples of trying to limit an individual's ability to have a firearm available to them if they need it to protect themselves and their family. This bill creates a whole new regulatory scheme of training classes, making it really expensive, making it really difficult for an individual to have their natural God-given right to be able to have a means of self-defense on them when they're going about their business. So very, very bad bill. It's not surprising that they're both being heard at the same time. It definitely follows that same line of logic. And even they have safe storage of firearms as part of the instruction that a concealed carry permit would have to get. So, these bills all go hand in hand. So not only do you have to have a written competency exam and a live fire exercise, you have to have 8 hours of instruction, including the live fire exercise and written exam. So, I mean, you have to jump through all these hoops to exercise a right that you should have, that you do have as just an individual living your life. Of course, these legislators are not at all champions of the working class, of the poor, of people who are working 2 jobs, just struggling to get by. How are they going to afford to take a day off work to go get this class and pay for all these expensive trainings? It's going to restrict the ability for concealed carry to those who have the means to do so. So definitely an attack on the working class, attack on lower income Coloradans, and attack on everybody who wants to be able to defend their lives. Thursday in the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, Thursday, April 11th, 1:30 p.m. Looking at the previous bill history, it did pass the House, of course, so now it's moved on to the Senate. I think this bill maybe it could be one that gets stopped. Again, on the House side, it was in the Judiciary, went to Finance, and then the Committee of the Whole. Interesting to me that it's going straight to the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. Maybe they are going to kill it. It'd be very interesting if that did happen. Of course, I hope they do. Maybe not. Maybe they'll pass it because they think the state committee is the best one for it. I don't know, but nonetheless, very bad bill. People, Colorado's pro-gun community, show up, speak out. Let's look at who's in that committee. These are the people you'd want to talk to and reach out to. Well, let me go back. That's what's being heard that day. So definitely going to be a busy committee with just those 2 hearings there. Looking at the Senate, State Veterans and Military Affairs. Let's see who the actual legislators serving on that committee are. So it's a 5-person committee. We know Tom Sullivan's a rabid anti-gunner, totally going postal against any pro-gun people down there. Larry Leston is the definition of a wet blanket. James Coleman, I'm sure anti-gun. Mark Baisley's a good, solid pro-gun vote. Chris Hansen, potentially a swing vote there. But nonetheless, Mark Baisley and Larry Liston voting against the bill. If they get Chris Hansen on there to vote against it as well, they could kill this bill. So if it was me trying to tell you who she'd reach out to in lobby, I'd really focus a lot on Chris Hansen. Tom Sullivan's a lost cause. Coleman as well. Reach out to Coleman. I've heard he's good on some other issues, so maybe he could potentially be persuaded, or maybe the fix is in and they want to kill this bill. I don't know.
I'll say what I've said online. Tom Sullivan doesn't stand on his own son's grave. He stomps on his own son's grave. All that dude does is talk about how he should be able to kill every single gun, destroy every single gun right we have because of what happened in a horrible tragedy. Yes, that was disgusting what happened. One evil man tried to do a ton of damage. Also, nobody talks about how his apartment was set up. Do you remember what happened that day? The Batman shooter's plan was to create a distraction by destroying his entire apartment complex and sending every single ambulance and police officer to his apartment because he destroyed the entire thing with a massive bomb. And then he was going to pick everybody off at the Batman theater. But the problem is he did a bad job of building his little bomb and it didn't go off. So thankfully, the only people that got hurt were the people at the Batman film. It could have been even worse than it was. And I'm saying that was a tragedy in itself. Everything that happened to those people was horrific, but it could have been even worse. And that is a grace that Colorado was given that day. But all people want to do is complain about guns. And by the way, are bombs illegal in this state? Can you build a bunch of bombs in your own apartment and try to set them off? I don't think so. So why isn't he doing more about that? Because evil people want to do evil things for evil reasons. But Tom Sullivan does not care. I'm convinced.
Wow. Yeah. Love the passion you have and the fire there. It's like you said, it's unfortunate what happened, but it definitely is no excuse to try and violate the rights of every single Coloradan that exists in this day and age, So definitely, if you can, people reach out to Chris Hansen, James Coleman, really tell them how bad these two anti-gun bills are, and really try and do everything you can to show up, speak out, and stop these bills from becoming law because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop until they take all our guns away. At least do the best. They're going to keep trying over and over again. So it stops with them failing to pass legislation like this, right? And then, of course, losing their elections come November, hopefully. So that's what we got on the Thursday. Two really bad anti-gun bills in the Senate State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. Check those out. Another anti-gun bill that had been flying under the radar for a lot of people. We got the last two bills we're going to talk about this week that are being heard on Thursday in the House Education Committee are horrible, horrible bills. Some of the worst we've seen, unfortunately. And that's saying a lot because there's so many bad bills out there. If you're familiar with the FASTER program, Colorado has this great program. Laura Carno, formerly associated with the Independence Institute, training teachers, administrators, and school staff to be able to use a firearm to defend the children, defend the students, defend the facility from some sort of crazed criminal, some violent criminal out there. Well, this bill would get rid of that. This bill would prohibit individuals from being able to have a firearm on the school property unless they meet all this criteria. So that means your teachers, your administrators, maybe trained staff who want to protect the kids will not be able to do so. This bill specifically is going to make schools an easier, softer target for people bent on violent crime. So horrible. Parenti is definitely one of the top legislators that's going to be targeted this year. She's very likely to lose. So hopefully the voters in her district know that she's trying to push bills to make schools easier targets for violent criminals. And then Hamrick as well is somebody else that is on the target list. And by that I mean they've won with very narrow margins 2 years ago in a changing political climate. Hamrick and Parenti are both people who could easily lose their races to the Republican challenger. So bad bill, disempowering teachers, disempowering school staff who want to be able to protect their kids from violent attackers, being heard Thursday in the House Education Committee, House Committee Room 107 at 1:30 p.m. All right. The other bill being heard in the House Education Committee, last bill we'll talk about that you as a Coloradan has the opportunity to speak out on. So encourage you, please show up at the Capitol. Please go speak, reach out to your elected representative, have those communications about this legislation we talk about every week. But House Bill 1363, the Charter Schools Accountability Bill, is an egregious attempt to go after Colorado's charter schools, pushed by some of the most anti-school choice legislators serving down at the Capitol, Tammy Story, Lisa Cutter, and Lorena Garcia. So really bad bill going after charter schools. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of regulation to it, but there's tons of articles as well about how bad this bill is for charter schools and how it would really work to shut down a lot of these charter schools and prevent new charter schools from being formed. I think one of the most egregious parts is that the local board could revoke or not renew your charter application because of the pupil enrollment. So they could say, hey, our school over here, our totally public school has less kids going to it now. Well, we don't like that. We're going to shut down your charter school in response to that, So one bad idea there. There's a lot to this piece of legislation, but really going after the charter schools, going after school choice in Colorado. So moving in the wrong direction totally. See how long this bill summary is. House Bill 1363, Garcia, Story, and Cutter being heard on Thursday, April 11th in the House Education Committee Room 107, 1:30 p.m. Please, if you believe in school choice, if you're involved in charter schools or want to have a better educational outcome for your children, please reach out, sign up, and speak out against this horrible, horrible bill.
Can't believe Garcia would sponsor such a horrible bill.
I just wanted to add that as horrible as this bill is, at least it still does allow local boards to have that control. So if you're in a place like where I am and you have a libertarian that's the head of the school board, literally, then that's never going to happen. They're going to support school choice, they support charter schools. So if others charter schools are forced to shut down, well, I hope that they'll look to Weld County and RE3J specifically, and some of these other places that have liberty-minded school boards that are still open for this.
Great point. Really appreciate that nuance to it, and really, of course, something that a lot of us talk about very often is that local, get even more local. We talk about state legislature, but get involved in your local school board, get involved in your local municipality, your city government, your county government, because that's how you can push back on some of these bad bills. Even if we can't stop them at the state legislature, we can make sure that they're not as powerful or implemented on the level down at the local communities. So that's what we got. Busy week, right at 9 o'clock, which is great. But we do have some more to talk about. Just, of course, all this information can be found at leg.colorado.gov. But here's some of the bills we track. We have this list kind of some of the bills that maybe weren't being heard this week in committee, but maybe they're being heard in the committee of the whole, or they've already passed or been killed. We just want to bring them up. So House Bill 1098, the cause required for eviction of a residential tenant, actually did pass both the Senate and the House and is at Governor Polis's desk. So making it harder for eviction of residential tenants, creating new regulatory schemes around when a landlord or property owner can kick somebody out of the property. So that bill did pass the legislature as a whole, unfortunately, and onto the governor's desk. We'll see what Polis does. Another bill that has been mentioned previously, House Bill 1292, the gun ban bill, the hypermasculine gun ban, as Michael Vance was saying. Absolutely ridiculous, egregious, horrific bill. Going to be heard tomorrow, potentially. It's been delayed a few other times, so I wouldn't be surprised if they keep punting it or keep kicking the can down the road. But it's scheduled on the House chamber calendar for tomorrow, so the House convenes at 10 a.m. So this bill potentially could be heard in the House as a whole. So very interesting, of course. I know a lot of these legislators who are going to be facing tight races this year are very reluctant to have their name attached with a sweeping gun ban like this that is clearly unconstitutional, but nonetheless, we'll see what happens. There's two. Yeah, go ahead.
One last thing is there are rumors that the Senadora is going to sponsor 1292, because as of right now, there is no Senate sponsor. Moms Demand Action put out an email saying that she's going to do it, but as of now, she hasn't. So that's something to watch out for.
And who was that?
Julie Gonzalez. She goes by the Senadora.
Gotcha. Okay, so there was no sponsor in the Senate, so that was delaying the bill. Apparently there is announced a sponsor in the Senate, so we'll see if that comes to fruition. I assume it will. I really think it probably will. We'll see how far this bill goes. There's two bills to go after these transportation network companies. So that's your Uber, your Lyft, your DoorDash, all that kind of stuff. This is the more reasonable one, quote unquote. No committee hearing signed yet, Senate Bill 75. And then there's the less reasonable one, quote unquote. It's all a matter of perspective, I guess, but at House Bill 1129, the next committee hearing has not yet been scheduled for that either. But nonetheless, always interesting to see these new emerging companies, technologies like rideshare platforms or delivery network platforms, of course, come under the scrutiny of these legislators who think they can do a better job trying to protect the workers and blah, blah, blah. So another interesting bill that has not made it anywhere. We talked about this the first week back in January. Senate Bill 43, the direct to consumer sales of raw milk. This bill has been shelved since then. It just sitting out in limbo there. We'll see if anything comes of this bill, but it's been months before any action has happened on this. The concealed carry permits and training, that's the 1174. We talked about that one. That's going to be heard this Thursday. The modifications to Colorado Open Records Act. This was the bad bill, making it harder for individuals to have access to their government, making the government less transparent, and going after people who are requesting too much information about our government, trying to shine some sunlight or daylight on the goings on there. Next committee hearing has not yet been scheduled as of today, when I checked earlier. House Bill 1296, really bad bill. The Sensitive Spaces Bill, Senate Bill 131. Next committee hearing has not yet been scheduled either. So we'll see when that gets scheduled. But right now it's sitting out in limbo waiting for the next committee assignment. The mobile electronic devices, the first bill we talked about, one of the first bills we talked about this week, going to be heard Tuesday, April 9th. 1039, a lot of consternation over the non-legal name changes, the AKA, this was the students in school bill, so allowing kids to change their names without the parents' approval and this and that. That bill did end up passing both the House and the Senate. So we'll see what Polis does. I imagine, of course, that he'll sign it. No doubt in my mind. But nonetheless, interesting to see this bill made it all the way through. It'd be interesting to get a record of who voted for it and make sure the voters are aware of that if they care about this issue come November. House Bill 1028, the overdose prevention centers, this quote unquote safe injection sites, as if there's a safe place to inject heroin. But nonetheless, this bill passed the House, and is moving on to the Senate. We'll see if the Senate is willing to take this one up and continue moving along. So keep an eye out for that. I'm tracking that one. Of course, we talked about Senate Bill 3, the $1.5 million for the Colorado Bureau of Investigations being heard Wednesday in the Judiciary Committee. 1270, this was the firearm liability insurance requirement. That is going to be, so it did pass committee last week. We missed that when we didn't do our live stream, but is going to be heard, is scheduled to be heard on the House chamber as a whole, Tuesday, 9 a.m. So this is the bill that would make it extremely cost prohibitive for an individual to own a firearm, to be able to have a firearm with them. Really bad bill, creating these insurance policies. We'll see if it makes it out of the House on Tuesday. So keep your eyes on that one. 1270, bad bill. Stephanie Luck's good bill, 1022. Next committee hearing has not yet been scheduled past the first committee, but it's just sitting in limbo currently. And then one of the most controversial bills, which explain the controversy, this bill has been scheduled multiple times, is not scheduled at all right now, Senate Bill 33. This is the one that would triple or quadruple the taxes on Airbnb owners if the Airbnb is used too much, according to these government standards. So this lodging property tax treatment, Senate Bill 33, still floating out in limbo.
And just to just to verify on that last bill, if that were to get passed, that would turn into a ballot initiative as well, correct? Because we're dealing with property taxes.
That's a great question. I don't believe so. I think the bill would reclassify these short-term rentals into, it would change the definitions, I think. So another little tricky way. So a short-term rental, now if you use it too much, it's now a commercial property. So it's not a short-term rental anymore, which is residential property taxes, which are a lot lower. It'd be commercial property. So it's changing the classification of when an Airbnb would be considered commercial property. And if it's used too often, it'd be commercial property and they have to pay commercial property taxes, which are a lot higher. So I don't believe there's any, I mean, maybe you can make a case that it should have to go to the voters, but I don't think it's not structured that way currently.
Yeah.
The towing carrier regulation. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Michael.
I was just going to say a lot of people aren't incorporated, so I was thinking they wouldn't necessarily have to pay. They shouldn't have to pay corporate taxes if they're not themselves incorporated.
Yeah, fair point.
So
the towing carrier regulation 1051, bad bill, creating a whole new regulatory system for tow truck companies, government regulation oversight. I mean, total licensing, bad stuff. Next committee hearing is not yet scheduled. Here's the one we are talking about. Michael, you brought this one up earlier. I just added it to the list this week. House Bill 1373, basically reversing the alcohol liberalization laws that the voters have been approving over the past several years. It would change the licensing so that it would eliminate the liquor license drugstore license, updating requirements for wholesalers, removing the cap on the amount of alcohol beverages a retailer can purchase from retail liquor stores, requiring a fermented malt beverage and wine retailer to display them in a single location on the sales floor, expanding certain licensees' ability to deliver alcohol to certain other licensees, prohibiting a fermented malt beverage and wine retailer from selling alcohol beverages with greater than 14% alcohol by volume. So, there's supposed to be something down there called the single subject rule that these bills are only really supposed to have. But of course, the subject is just alcohol beverage retail sales, basically, and licensing is pretty broad subject that encompasses every aspect of retail beverage, retail licensing and sales. So bad bill, really bad bill, restricting, moving backwards on the alcohol liberalization we've seen. Disappointed to see Perry Will on that one. I know he's getting a lot of credit for his mustache, but nonetheless, He should be criticized for pushing prohibition type of laws, anti-alcohol laws out there. So
He
next
looks
committee
like a
hearing is not yet
teetotaler.
scheduled. Yeah. Some of the bills that have died this year, the regulate flavored tobacco products. Great to see that killed again this year. That's become a pattern. So hasn't made a momentum. Of course, the ridiculous pet animal registration system bill killed immediately. The reduction of the state income tax rate was a great bill that potentially the governor supported, but was killed. Oh gosh, the horrible vulnerable road user protection enterprise that would create a new fee or tax on almost every vehicle in Colorado was killed. Thankfully, I was surprised to see that, but thankful. Very thankful to see Senate Bill 159 get killed. This is the one that would have basically outlawed oil and gas wells by lowering the amount of permits that would be issued every year and not renewing them by 2030 or 2032. So thankfully that bill was killed, made it a little further than I would like. And there we go. So that's where we're at, folks. But
Is it
Michael, any
open
other
session now?
thoughts? Or yeah, Natalie, Michael, Mayor Lamb, anybody else want to jump in here? Anything else you guys want to bring up?
Yeah, go to 24-1311. Because I don't think you covered that, and that's on tomorrow. This is an attack on Tabor. And it's tomorrow afternoon, 1:30 p.m. in the House Finance Committee. And it is for perspective. We've got roughly 1.8 billion coming back to us in Tabor refunds. That's the projected amount. This bill will divert just under 700 million of that, a big jump from the other bills we've seen. And it will, instead of giving our Tabor refunds to taxpayers, this shifts the $695 million to residents who happen to have a child under age 16 or under. And basically, it's discrimination. It is taking money taxpayers paid in, whether through income tax, which is about 65% of the collections to the state are from income tax. 35% are from sales tax. This says we don't care about that. We're going to issue $695 million in refundable tax credits, meaning you didn't even have to have a tax liability, and you will get thousands of dollars in our Tabor refunds. That was sitting on the back burner, and now all of a sudden is on tomorrow's agenda at 1:30 p.m.
Wow. Yeah, discriminatory. Obviously smacking in the face of Tabor, changing that refund mechanism to only give it to a certain group of people, subsidizing people who don't want to work, really is another way to put it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Giving these people money, even if they don't pay any taxes, they're getting a refund check back. I mean, what kind of society are we creating here?
Yeah. And for the big picture, if the government wants to do these goodwill programs, they can do it out of the general fund. This bill says it will only come from Tabor. And if there is no Tabor over collected money, they don't fund it. And it will wipe it out. To me, there is a blank check clause buried about page 10 on this thing that to me says they can just tweak the numbers if they want through a bill, which we've seen they can pass in a few days, several days. And so I want to bring that to everybody's attention. I do plan on testifying on this one tomorrow. And I know all of us are so overwhelmed with all the bills coming in. This one, again, is sitting on a back burner, but now all of a sudden is up. And this new family affordability refundable tax credit is on top of two other mechanisms they've already put. So when I said we had 1.8 billion in Tabor refunds and 700 million going to this, the other chunks of the pie are already being eliminated. So once again, very likely, very potentially could be eliminating our Tabor refunds. This is not a temporary tax credit. It is permanent. There's no sunset. Doesn't go to voter. No voter consent. It's at the will of the legislators, and the usual suspect sponsors are happy to put it forward.
Bill's being heard Monday, tomorrow, April 8th in the House Finance Committee, House Committee Room 112 at 1:30 p.m. Natalie, really appreciate you bringing this one up. Appreciate you showing up and testifying. Hopefully there's some outcry on this, and hopefully, as people are having less kids than ever. So, hopefully there's more people who'd be against this because they're not going to get a slice of this pie that they're owed, the tax money they're owed. Instead, it's going to go to somebody else.
Why should we put our faith in a bill sponsored by Faith Winter?
That's the point I was going to bring up is, do you think that given her recent problems that this might hurt the chances of this bill in the Senate?
I don't think it will. I don't think it'll hurt it. It's going to the House first. People forget about her substance abuse, slurring, etc. Chris Kennedy's been talking about this one, and I should have picked up on it. But it's like all of us, we're kind of drinking from the fire hose with everything going on. But I didn't know it was this bad. I mean, it takes a whopping amount of this with this outright, it really is discrimination. You pay into the system, you don't have kids, you don't have a kid under age 16, forget your credit. Not credit, forget getting your Tabor money back.
Right. Yeah. Horrible bill. Horrible bill. So please, people, reach out to the bill sponsors.
Frankly,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. One of the other things on this, when they say the money is going to a resident, that's their wording. That to me says, again, like some other similar bills they've run through, it's not requiring somebody to have a social security number. And it can be a TIN, a tax ID number. And to me, what I've read that there's really no proof that somebody has been contributing to the system based on that. And with the amount of migrants that we've, undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens, whatever you want to say, it's more handouts.
Definitely more handouts, bad bill. Yeah, very, very bad. So thank you for bringing that one up. People, please reach out, speak out, and make some noise on this.
That's the only one I've got off the other. Oh, besides the RTD bill that'll be coming up, but we'll talk about that later.
Perfect. All right. Well, just opening the floor up. Anybody else got anything here before we call it for the day?
Yeah, if I can have a minute, we had a board meeting this last week here in Keansburg, and the town board took official stances on several pieces of legislation, 2 in favor, several opposing. So I'll just run it down real quick. It was all entirely unanimous. In fact, there was almost no debate or discussion. We had a brief discussion on some of these at the previous board meetings. We were all kind of ready to go. And but so we passed in favor of the right to remedy of the construction defects, and in support of increased punishments for the human trafficking. That was SB 24035, and then opposing the accessory dwelling unit preemptions and Bill 241152, and then opposing, of course, the ban on semi-automatic weapons, opposing the preemptions and burdens in the House Bill 241313, opposing the attempts at speech control in Senate Bill 24084, opposing the expansion of spaces where firearms cannot be lawfully carried in SB 24131, and finally opposing the phasing out of the oil and gas drilling in SB 24159. Fortunately, of course, as we've discussed, some of these have already been killed and others are not looking too good. But I was very happy to get our board members on record and to have this so that if I am able to make it work with my schedule and testify at some of these, that I can say that this is the official stance of the town of Keansburg. And certainly, again, when I need to run for re-election here in a couple of years, these are things that I can point to that I know our residents will strongly support.
Awesome, Mr. Mayor. Really appreciate that. That's great. Is there any press releases or way we can get that, try and get that out there to people?
Not yet. I tend to make my own statements on my Twitter, X. So I have been quite busy here recently. I'm hoping this week that I'll be able to make a couple posts with that. But yeah, I'll also discuss with our town manager about making a press release just to have another way to get that out there.
Awesome. Awesome. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all your hard work there and fighting for liberty. So thank you.
Good
Mary
job,
Ann, I have a
Mary.
quick question for you.
Sure.
Have you had a chance to look at HB 24-1366?
I don't recall by the number.
It is the Sustainable Local Government Community Planning Act. As of now, there's no Senate sponsor, but I was curious
Climate
if you,
action. Okay. No, yeah, I haven't. I've not been made aware of this one whatsoever.
yeah.
Yeah, if you want that federal money or state money, you got to have your climate related goals, plans, and strategies in place. It's that same thing we've seen time and time again. You got to follow along with the program and create your community the way that these legislators want you to, if you want a slice of the pie.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into this one a bit more and certainly bring it to my town manager's attention. April 9th. Oh, that's this week. That's gonna be
Yeah,
quick.
Tuesday.
Wow.
good catch on. Good catch on that one. Yeah, transportation, housing, and local government, LSBA.
Can you scroll back? Oh, no, you're good. Okay. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate everybody joining. Michael, of course, Legislative Director, Libertarian Party, Colorado. Thank you for all your work.
Thank
Natalie,
you.
our great Liberty leader in Lakewood, and Mayor Aaron Lamb of Keensburg, and everybody. Jody, thanks for showing up down at the committee hearings. Thanks for all the people watching on YouTube. Forest Mommy, appreciate all your comments in the chat. People, please like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in a week. I'll post throughout the week on Twitter, on Free State Colorado Twitter, kind of giving that synopsis. I'll post in the morning. Here are the bills we discussed that are going to be heard that day. And then at the end of the day, I'll post, here's the outcome of those bills. So follow along on Twitter every day to kind of see the status of the bills we talked about this week, because there was a good whopping amount there. So
Thank you, Mr. Work.
Thank you.
wonderful. Appreciate you, everybody. Take care. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.